So Nick, I think the best way to start this conversation is to sort of lay some foundation here, or with a starting point, and just talk about how do you see student engagement, what it is, what's a working definition that we could proceed with in our conversation?
Right. So I think there's a couple of different ways you can look at it. There is the literature that describes the formal term that describes the way that engagement happens, that talks about different models of engagement, and these go back 30 or 40 years, often rehashing very similar things. Probably you've seen things like Aston's work where they talk about cognitive and emotional and behavioral engagement as three key components of it. There are some of those models that look at things like the way that students interact between each other and the interaction with the content and interaction with the instructor. You've got Garrison's community of inquiry model, which most people who teach online will encounter at some point. It talks about the teacher presence, social presence, and cognitive presence. But really, you can boil all of these things down to being fundamentally about human interactions. They're about, the way in which we connect with another human being in a learning space, and the things that we can do as teachers to build that space, build it as a community, to make it a place where questions and questioning are normal and okay, and where people feel like they have the opportunity to engage. And I think one of the challenges in a time like this is that many of us are getting daily, getting vendors coming after us trying to sell us products that tell you that they can measure engagement, that they can enhance engagement, and almost all of them have very shaky ground to stand on, if any. And engagement is so much more than the clicks and the time spent watching videos. It's really what we're doing right now, having a conversation. And that can happen in lots of different ways, in lots of different spaces. It's partly about our pedagogical background. It's partly about the pedagogies of our discipline. But it's all fundamentally rooted in this idea of human connection and care for each other as human beings. And I think that it really doesn't matter that much whether you're online or face-to-face in a live classroom. Those principles still apply. Mm-hmm. The way that we apply them may be slightly different, or the tools that we use might be different, but those fundamental principles are the same.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's what was striking me as you were talking, Nick. Like the definition of engagement that you were offering us is one that you're suggesting works equally well in a brick and mortar classroom, or is equally applicable in a brick and mortar classroom as it is to this kind of online, or sometimes we've been talking about it as remote teaching environments.
Yeah, that's true. And I think what's making it so much more visible now is that we have recordings of the way in which we interact with people. If anyone's gone and recorded a session and gone back and had a look at what happens in their classroom, it makes it very visible what these interactions look like. Whereas before we may not have seen them in the same kind of way. And there's also, to be honest, there's a lot of mythology around what happens in a face-to-face classroom that imagines engagement that may not always be there. So it's really visible in your Zoom class if the participants list is pretty short. It's also visible when you see the same 4 people in the chat all the time. But that's the same as those students who are sitting in the back of the classroom and never ever ask a question. There's no real difference there. It's just that it's really in our face, and it's literally in our face because we've got a screen right here that's telling us that's what's happening. And so I think some of the anxiety that occurs comes from that right now.